When you have ambitions, when you have aspirations, oftentimes I think for women, that's viewed as a negative. Like you are somehow, you should just be thankful for where you are, enjoy your station, wherever that is professionally, and not express ambition. How did you square that? Because you have steadily risen throughout your career. You've taken on more. You've become a speaker. You've become an expert. You know, to serve as you do on AARP's board is huge, Alicia. You know that. But you speak all over the world now. How did you square that with what I'm certain was probably some pushback or some sideways glances? Because I know we still get it today.
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard and it was uncomfortable. But one of the things I told somebody the other day, one of the things is getting support, not just from my mentors, but from my peers who had the same aspirations and who stuck by me and who would say, hey, Alicia, you ain't no imposter. Go in that room and just tell them like it is. You know, don't feel
doubt
like
yourself.
You have to. Yeah. You know, be you. So I learned that being authentic was what kept me, you know, in check. You know, being transparent and really, you know, somebody said to me a couple months ago, what about your young self? What would you say about your young self? I said, I used to get angry. I used to emote. I said, but now I've learned to just have my argument and my data and my evidence already. And they can't fight that. You know, if I want to talk about policy, here's the science to inform the policy. Here's the demographics and the data that will inform this policy. Not you got to do it because we say we have a right to it.
Welcome to On Board with Transparent Leadership, an Easter Seals podcast. I'm Kendra Davenport, President and CEO of Easter Seals, and I am joined today by Dr. Catherine Alicia Georges, Professor and Chairman Emerita of City College of New York, Herbert Lehman College. I've known Alicia now for a little more than 3 years. Alicia was the board chair when I started with Easter Seals, so we are good friends. But for those of you who don't know her, Alicia is an educator and a practitioner and a community activist. She is a champion for women in nursing in particular, and she's an authority on nursing. She speaks and is a sought-after speaker. We were just discussing before we even started this podcast how much she travels. She has been all over the world addressing healthcare issues, and her professional career spans more than 3 decades. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Georges. Alicia, to me,
yes,
love
Alicia.
having you.
Thank you for having me, Kendra. I always love interacting with you and learning from you and sharing with you. So this is a great
It's mutual. We're a mutual admiration society. And I really welcome the opportunity to talk with you a little bit about leadership. You had a career, your career started at a time when there were very few women working. You were definitely in the minority in many ways. Can you talk a little bit about what was the impetus that got you to go into nursing and then to carry on and do so much more, because you're still doing?
Yeah. At this point in my life, you would think I would stay home and
slow
relax,
down.
right? But I can't. It's still my passion. Well, just to understand my journey into this whole career is I come from St. Thomas in the United States Virgin Islands. And my godmother was a nurse midwife. I think she delivered at all my friends who were delivered by her in the generation before me. And one of the things that really prompted me into going into nursing, one, it was nursing or teaching. I said, and I ended up teaching for all those years. But, you know, the nurses in the islands were so well respected. They were powerhouses. They ran the health department. They ran the hospital. They made the home visits. They were parts of the community, and they were highly respected. And because they were nurse midwives, they were excellent. They managed all the care of women, pregnant women, and thereafter, the postpartum. So I said, I want to be like her. So I said, I'm going to be a nurse midwife. Well, I didn't follow that course anyway, but left and went to Seton Hall in New Jersey, College of Nursing. And in there, I really developed a passion for caring for people in community. And I said, when I'm done with this rigorous curriculum, I am going to be a community health nurse, because I saw that I could combine because in my practice as a student, you could combine, community, you could do maternity, you can do all across the board. So that prompted me, and I just enjoyed it. I have been ups and downs. It was hard for me. I graduated from school in the 60s. From Seton Hall. It was the throes of civil rights, discriminatory practices, difficult to really penetrate even some of the organizations that I applied for positions in New York. But visiting Nurse Service of New York, which was where I really wanted to go, did hire me. And so I ended up working in the Bronx, where I still am today, in the Bronx, and felt that at that time I could do so much more. You got to see people in the real environment. Hospitals are, artificial, and so that kept me there. And then from there, being part of community, you can't help but getting involved politically, socially, and so that really, and I still am. I still remain committed. I still, just a few weeks ago, I went and organized all the with one of the nurses from one of the chapters, organized Advocacy Day in Albany with the with all the chapters of the National Black Nurses. And of course, my state senator showed up. He knew he had. He said, I had to come. And my assemblyman is the Speaker of the Assembly. He arranged for a room for us. The two nurses they had, so I said, oh my God, I can continue to do this. This is I don't need to go to Albany, to be honest. I need to go to advocate for folks. But these nurses needed to see where they could make an impact and how they were respected and how they were treated, introduced on the floor of the assembly. So they were feeling so good about what they did. So
Valued.
That's why I continue to do it.
Valued. I mean, I think when people like you devote the kind of time you do to mentoring and nurturing the careers of younger women, I definitely think it empowers them because they feel valued, they feel seen. And I think having a mentor, someone you can look up to, someone who's still so engaged and so happy to be working this late in your career, I think really is something to look forward to and to look up to. Can you talk a little bit about whether or not there was anyone, you touched a little bit on it, that you saw other people going into nursing, but throughout your career, was there a mentor who really influenced you or who you really relied on for guidance and advice?
Well, there was more than one. I tell folks I've had many mentors, because for me, in mentoring, it's at the point in time where you are in your career trajectory, who you need to be the person that you go to. So I've had folks like the former dean at University of Michigan, and before, and who had also been one of the first black woman to be the deputy director of the National Institutes of Mental Health, and so I met her not knowing she was a nurse. I met her at a friend's wedding. And it was after she went back to Yale, and I don't know why I was reading, I realized, oh my God, that's the woman, that's Rita Duma. She's written so much. She's a group person. She's a tea. I was like fascinated. And I wrote to her, I said, oh my God, you are the Rita Duma. She said, no, I'm your friend. Anything you need, you do it. Up to the day she died, the night she died in hospice, they called me from her room, because she and I became so close. Now, she did holler at me at times when she thought I shouldn't have done stuff. And, Then I had another mentor who was
so
also
she was transparent with you.
Yes, who said to her, not all of us have the same opinion. You leave her alone. And that was Dr. Gloria Smith, who was like the number 2 at Kellogg Foundation and who was a dean at the School of Nursing at University of Oklahoma, who was the head of the public health department in Michigan and was dean at Wayne State. And those women, they would say to me, they pushed you. They said, be brave. Like
they
when I
drove
was
you.
going through trying to maneuver and navigate what was happening within nursing and trying to get promoted. And so there's what they're saying. You just got to be bold. You just do it.
One of the things I will always remember when I started at Easter Seals, you were chairwoman of our board. And one of the first things you said to me was, you do you, Kendra. We're here to support you. We're not here to get in your way or hamper you. And it was like a breath of fresh air. Really, it was, because I thought, wow. And you said, you keep us informed, but you're driving the bus. You make your decisions and we'll support you. And when we don't support you, we'll let you know. Is that, and you have, but it was so liberating for me as a leader to feel, gosh, my board chair trusts me. Is that indicative of the kind of style of leadership you exemplified or clung to throughout your career? Can you talk a little bit about the kind of leader you are?
Right.
Because you definitely are a very empowering, transparent leader.
Right. Somebody, when I was being interviewed, for the to be the president-elect of AARP, one of the members of the governance committee asked me, says, so tell us, what is your leadership style? And I said, eclectic. And I said, he said, what does that mean? I said, because different times in one's career and one's work and interaction with people in organization, you may use different styles. I said, however, in being eclectic, I'm inclusive. I'm transparent. I'm authentic. I will tell you, I will be respectful of you and respectful of your opinion. I do not have to agree with you, but I will bring to the table the evidence and the data that I have to support what I'm saying. And so I believe firmly that leaders, anybody who's a leader, one, you got to have courage. That's why I love this book. I kept it so I couldn't find it at some place, but I think somebody borrowed it. But I firmly believe that you've got to have the courage to speak out. You've got to, without offending and without trying to destroy anybody.
You do. I've watched you stand your ground. And that brings me to something I frequently talk about on this podcast, because I continue to feel that women are, I think it's more difficult to be a woman in the working world because you're held to different standards. And one of them is not being viewed as aggressive when you are simply being assertive. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, even at this juncture in my career, to watch you hold your ground and stand your ground in meetings, and to your point, do so in a courteous, respectful way, but be immovable. No, I am sorry. I am correct on this point, and you stand corrected, mm-hmm. has also been really, I think it's been good. It's been great to see someone like you do that. And I think if more women had a role model like you, they wouldn't be so shy about sharing their opinion. And they wouldn't be so dejected when they are called aggressive for mm-hmm. merely being assertive. Is this something you've seen change over time? What is your viewpoint on the way women are accepted or not accepted in senior management or leadership roles? What do you think some of the pitfalls are? And are those the same as they were 20 or 30 years ago? They
are and they're not. Early on in my leadership, career, when I spoke out, because I was always in a room with, white males dominating on any board that I've been on. And the first thing they say, oh, you're just angry. You're just one of those angry women. So that was the term they used. That became unacceptable. And so you would hear a variation. You're too assertive. You're very pushy. You want to get ahead. So I would always say, well, you can say what you want. I am an influencer. And that's what leaders are. They're influencers. How you perceive me is your personal issue. Because, and then I would, like folks would call you, hey, babe. And I said, don't you call me babe. And they said, oh. And then I understand. I said, yeah, in your generation, that was acceptable. No more.
No more.
But you see, they didn't stay mad at me. But now I'm seeing where folks we're getting pushback. In these times, we're getting pushback and we're being called women in leadership position or aspiring to be leaders are being pushed back with, maybe you need to know your place. And I always says, where's that? I like the seat at the top, head of the table. That's my place. That's where I see my place, and that's, it's harder. I think it's harder now for some of the younger, smart I've seen such brilliant young women across all races, and within what do they call them? Sex millennial, whatever, millennial, Gen X, whatever the next generations are. They're bright, but they've been so beaten down in many instances. And so they need people who say, you got a right to say that. Say it in a respectful way. Have your data. I always tell people, in God we trust, the rest of you bring the data to the table. That's fine. And you stand your ground. But what I'm seeing, which really makes me sad, is that so many women who've been, they're backing off from being supportive of some of these young, bright women we have in this country who we need to push and push, and not for us to say, well, I want to be this. When somebody says, would you? I said, no, but I got a person who could be on your board. I know somebody who you could call. So and so should be the one who should be pushed for this. I'm done. My career is. But we're still so hesitant because we want to, quote, continue to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You touched on something. You said, I want to get ahead. And I think that's another thing that women find challenging, because when you have ambitions, when you have aspirations, oftentimes I think for women, that's viewed as a negative. Like you should just be thankful for where you are, enjoy your station, wherever that is professionally, and not express ambition. How did you square that? Because you have steadily risen throughout your career. You've taken on more. You've become a speaker. You've become an expert. To serve as you do on AARP's board is huge, Alicia. You know that. But you speak all over the world now. How did you square that with what I'm certain was probably some pushback or some sideways glances? Because I know we still get it today.
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard and it was uncomfortable. But one of the things I told somebody the other day, one of the things is getting support, not just from my mentors, but from my peers who had the same aspirations and who stuck by me and who would say, hey, Alicia, you ain't no imposter. Go in that room and just tell them like it is. Don't
doubt
like
yourself.
Yeah. Be you. So I learned that being authentic was what kept me, in check, being transparent. And really, somebody said to me a couple months ago, what about your young self? What would you say about your young self? I said, I used to get angry. I used to emote. I said, but now I've learned to just have my argument and my data and my evidence already. And they can't fight that. If I want to talk about policy, here's the science to inform the policy. Here's the demographics and the data that will inform this policy. Not you got to do it because we say we have a right to it. Nobody wants to hear that anymore. You need to come. We did a lot of that. I know my civil rights friend says to me I should shut up about it. But I said, but we did a lot of emoting in those days. Now we come ready with what needs. We've done the analysis.
Prepared.
We've got the data. Here's where we are going, and we're not moving from it. We're going to stand our ground around these issues. And so but it was hard. It took a while. I've been in nursing now. This going to be, I don't mind saying it, I will have graduated 60 years ago this year from Seton Hall. And it's hard. It was hard.
What advice would you give, male or female, to young professional today, just coming into the working world? What would you tell them?
One, they need to define what their purpose is. What do they really want to do? And they need to learn how to really communicate well. And in learning how to communicate well, you got to learn how to be a critical listener. You've got to learn how to listen and don't jump the gun before saying, well, that's not what we were taught. Well, that may not be what you were taught, but listen to what they're saying. You'll see both sides and then offer a solution. Now, I'm not talking about compromising. I'm talking about win-win. So because when people are made to compromise all the time, that makes it much more uncomfortable and they're just going to be resistant over time. So, just learning and that you did not invent the world today. It's been around before you.
Been around for a while.
And you need to learn from some of the people who have been here. You don't have to agree, but you don't have to cut them off because you and them come from a different generation. That's when, my folks are saying, oh, these young people, I said, well, listen to them too. They have a point too, and they should listen to you. So I think learning to have that open communication with the people you're working with as you move through your profession will be valuable.
Thank you. I am asked frequently by more junior employees, what do I do? What should I do to invest in myself so that I can move to the next level in my career? And I think many of them want to hear, go get an MBA, get a master's degree. And I frequently say, if you want to get another degree, then by all means, it will help you get into management, but it is not the be all end all. And I think you made a great point, Alicia, about learn, listen, learn. I tell people just read everything you can get your hands on. Is there anything you would share with someone who asked you that question? What should I do to invest in myself to ensure I can advance in my career, whatever it is? Is there some fail-safe piece of advice you'd give them?
I don't know if it's fail-safe, but I say to people, where do you want to be in 5 years? And then backtrack. So you want to be, and I would say you want to be a chief nurse. What is it that's needed for that role? And backtrack. If you need to get a master's or a doctorate in nursing practice or MBA, then so be it. But you also need to know what that job involves. You don't get it just because it's a title. It's hard work. And also one of the things that we don't help young people to look at is to do a strength analysis. And to look at what their strengths are and also what they need to do to make sure they increase. They may have it, but it needs to be enhanced. And I don't want to call it weakness. I want to call it more challenges or what they need to do to get to the next step. And then I say along the way now, you begin to talk to other people, begin to create now a network of folks who will be giving you some advice, not just a person, but go talk to folks who are in those roles, go attend those meetings or those conferences where these folks are and get a sense of whether or not that's really what you want. People say, I want to be a director. Well, they think because it's going to pay more money and they're going to have power, but they don't really understand what the position is, and they really need to become more self-aware, and really, I firmly believe in self-assessment, not just awareness, but assessing and really taking, and then being very, very intentional about the
what you're
steps
doing.
you must take to get where you need to be.
Yes. Transparency, you know, is part of this whole podcast. And I think you know how I feel. I think you can't be transparent enough in business. And I think it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. It can make things challenging from time to time, because once you commit, you're committed. That means everything is out there for critique, for observation, for evaluation. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think of you as being someone who is very transparent in all things. You call it like it is. You tell people exactly how you feel. Is there an instance where that was really challenging for you that you can think of in business, or one you reverse, one where you think, if I wasn't transparent, this wouldn't have turned out as well as it did?
Right. And there's a couple of incidences. You know, some people don't like to hear the truth. And so, you know, because it makes them uncomfortable. So I firmly believe in being transparent. Now, being transparent has then put me in the hot seat, because I then had to go ahead and do the things I needed to do to assure that the outcomes were positive. That meant that you have to reach out, but because of your transparency, you got to reach out to people who you may not have wanted to in the past, but you have to learn how to work with all these various and diverse, you know, folks of opinions and thinking. But in the long run, by being transparent, I took the licks for some things, but the outcomes were exactly what needed to be. Because at the end, we were stronger than we were when we began. And one of the big issues was I was very transparent about what I thought was unfairness years ago. And I went to the guy who, one of my political people. And I was very clear with him. He and I to this day are good friends. Because I was clear with him and I said, you need to now learn how to be transparent with me. And if you knew that there were other reasons, you should have shared it with us. You know, so it took a while for us to work out relationships, but we ended up with a stronger department. We got money, we got movement, and he and I became, you know, over the years, we really became good colleagues and now friends. Mm-hmm.
Good friends. I think you and I have talked a little bit about this at other times. I am someone who believes, and I know there's a whole other school of thought, but I really believe, because you devote so much time of your life, so much of yourself to work, that if you're not making friends along the way, if you're not really enjoying the people with whom you work, then you need to move on. Mm-hmm. And I look back and it's really gratifying to hear you say, I'm really good friends with this gentleman that, you know, we locked horns from time to time. But that's a friendship built over years. Is that a theme? And do you subscribe to the same mentality that I do, that work and your personal life can be intermingled, or do you feel there should be separation between church and state? How do you
don't think it can be separated. You know, I think you've got some fences you have to keep up. You know, but there should be no reason. I'm who I am, and that's the way I'm going to be at work. You know, so my personality doesn't change because I'm the chair of the department or I was president of AARP.
You know, I think it would be exhausting to be any other way.
Yes,
and yet I know people who are very rigid about, my personal life does not enter in. I don't discuss my family. I don't discuss my friends. I'm work. And I think, oh my gosh, that would be almost impossible for me.
Right. But not only that, think of then when you see their leadership and see what happens around their staff and see what happens, you know. One of the people I admire so greatly is the immediate, she's no longer the executive director, Joanne Jenkins, you know, who was the CEO of AARP. And tough leader, but so open, so inclusive. I mean, it was like, people were like, oh, my morning when she decided it was time to move on, in her life. But it was because she was personable, but she also stuck to what the mission, the goals, and getting the outcomes that were needed. And that's, and she believed in disruption, as she called it, but, it wasn't the bad disruption, but, the kinds of things that needed. And that was her personality.
Yep.
And I know, and I maybe because she and I share the same sign, we kind of,
What's the sign, Alicia? You got to tell us.
Aquarian. I'm an Aquarian.
Okay.
And, and that kind of, they said that, I don't know that I believe all that, but there's something that we'll always understand, because now she didn't tell you all her personal business, but she never denied, her joy in having a grandson, a new baby, her joy in, other people doing things, her joy in seeing other people within her enterprise getting awards, those are the things that people need, because those leaders who are then so, I think, so cold and so siloed, their staff is not happy. You can see it because if they set a tone, I always say the tone at the top is what makes a difference.
I think there's truth to that, because I think people, regardless of where they are, what level they're at in a business or in a nonprofit, they need to see that everyone's human. And I think the more human your leader is, and I don't mean, bringing all your dirty laundry in or, but I think they need to see when you have an off day or when you have something in your personal life that overshadows a death in the family, whatever, that you're human and that you'll get through it, and that, you appreciate their grace and patience. But I think that gives them license to experience normal emotions too, and not worry about being, maligned or sidelined because they are being human. So I love that.
I agree.
And when you think about it now, is there some challenge at work that you still are perplexed by, or have you got it all sussed out at this point, Alicia?
I think over the many years, I've learned techniques and strategies so that I don't get all stressed out about things. One is, I love to embrace young people, but I've learned how not to even take them on when they're ranting and raving and, all the things they know and, and they and this is how it is. And then, I just listen to them and, I don't get upset anymore, because they're going to see it ain't quite. And that happened recently in an encounter with a dean at where I'm doing some work now. And I just let her carry on and, done. You should have done this. And I just, okay, fine. First thing I said, would you like to take over the project? That's all.
They stopped talking, huh?
And then all of a sudden the back, she was not going to threaten me. Not threaten or make me upset. I just said, hey, at this stage in my life, I've been there, done this 100 more times than you will ever do in, at this stage in your development. And so now it's a whole different, I don't see her and speak to her, but all of a sudden everything's changed. The way, if I write something, it's oh yes, you should do this immediately. Yes, you don't get stressed. I said, well, they got their problems too, because that's not my full-time job. I'm not responsible for all that stuff, so I don't have to worry about it. But there are borders and fences that I will not let you cross, but I'm not going to get all blown away by it anymore. It is a function. It's a function of longevity in these kinds of systems, that help you to cope.
Your stamina has always been something I've admired. And, I think we're similar in that respect. We like a lot going on. We like to have things planned in advance. What What do you do to keep going, though? Is there something you do that helps keep you healthy mentally, physically, able to continue to work? Is there something you do for yourself?
I read a lot, junky books, very knowledgeable books. I call them my aunt call them airport books, but they're on my nook, so I read, there are no plots. There's not, you don't have to analyze no data and it just relaxes you. And the other thing is, I have massages done every couple weeks. I have facials done every couple weeks.
You take care of you.
Every couple weeks. My feet, my hair, I that's the kind of thing. Oh, I will just go downtown and just go to a movie, not a movie. I don't like this smelly. Go to a play. Go down Broadway. I'm going to go down this weekend if I can get a ticket. It's hard to get tickets this weekend, but and just call somebody up and we'll go out and have lunch. Or my best friend, she's in Florida now, so we haven't seen each other for a couple, months. But we'll call each other up and we just laugh and talk. We just, and that, and even now we talk almost every night, and we've been friends since we were 17 and in college.
Friends are good for the soul. Friends that have lasted that long are like family, yeah. I think. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I love talking to you. I could talk to you all day, and I love to end these episodes with what we call an Ask Me Anything segment. So stick around for that. But before I let you go, Dr. Georges, I'd love to ask you one final question. And anyone who knows me, as you just created the perfect tee up for this. I'm a voracious reader. I read constantly. I read the newspaper more than I read anything right now. And I read a couple newspapers a day usually, but I love books. Is there a book you're currently reading? Can be anything, can be about leadership, can be about anything, even one of the junk books on your nook that you would recommend.
Well, and I can't even remember the name, to be honest with you, but because it's one of my nook books, but one that really dealt with about family and the criticality of family relationships. And why that reverberated with me is because so much of what's going on about family caregiving, and burdens that families have. And in this story, they didn't see themselves as being burdened by caring for grandparents and other extended family members. They came together as a network. And when I think back of this book that I can't find, I think somebody has it, is what's her name? Brené Brown's book, Dare to Lead. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And, and when I thought of that family and how they were all work, I mean, they had their disputes, but they had courage. They trusted each other. And it's the trustworthiness that I saw in these two. When I look at and remember Brown's stuff, it's about courage and being trustworthy and integrity. And that's what that family had. The story ended where they were caring for a grandparent. And so I don't, you could imagine, I'm sure it was fiction. It was fiction. And you could imagine they may have had, some other iterations over time of what happened with family. But that to me is important. And it was, and I still like Brown stuff. You read all Covey, Carter, all these other things. But Brown's book came out in, I think it was 2018 or 2019. And that continues to be something that I hold on to.
I like Brené Brown too. Mm-hmm. I like Simon Sinek as well. I read a lot of his stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your candor. It's always a pleasure. And I know you like having lunch, and we are overdue for a lunch. So the next time I'm in Manhattan, we'll do lunch.
Please do. Please give me a call. Take care. And I'll see you in May. I'll be at the reception on board meeting. I have some earlier that week. So, but I'll be there. So you'll see me in May.
I look forward to it.
Okay,
thank you,
great.
Dr. Georges. Today's Ask Me Anything question is, what strategies do I employ to remain open to different viewpoints when I'm under pressure? And the short answer is I'm not great at this. This is something I struggle with. I tend to make gut decisions that are based on what I feel initially. And I'll be honest, I rarely change. I'm trying as I become more mature to be more open to different and dissenting opinions, but it is a struggle. And I think we all have to be honest about what we're good at and what we're not, and identify those things we struggle with and really work to be better at them. Fortunately, I am surrounded by very, very thoughtful people who will say to me, wait, Kendra, before you decide, before you jump in, hear me out. And listening is a big part of it, right? I'm not a great listener at times. I love listening, but in the heat of the moment, when I'm under pressure, am I a good listener? Not always. And I think my mind is usually going a mile a minute and I'm already on step C, D, E. I'm not really paying enough attention at times to A, B, or C. So what do? I try to step back. If you're fortunate, as I am, and you have people working alongside you whose opinions and viewpoints you really have confidence and faith in, then it's not such a difficult, I guess it's not such a difficult challenge to remain open to different views. And I do think it's important that people kick the tires on thought processes, on opportunities or on challenges. And I would say I'm better at convening a group to talk about or ideate, collaborate about an idea if I'm under pressure to come up with a decision. That's helpful to me when everybody's brought into the room and the whole purpose of the discussion is to identify look at the challenge or the opportunity from every angle. But when I'm forced to make a decision and I'm under pressure and I've got people, other voices in my head or people chiming in or hear me out on this, I would say that's something I struggle with because I often feel as the leader, it's my responsibility. And yet again, I would say I'm getting better at seeking out the advice of people who I really respect and whose position or conditions or that they put on decision making or their engagement, seek that out, get their opinion. And I often find it's helpful, even if you're under pressure, to go to somebody who has no skin in the game, who has nothing to win or lose by sharing their opinion, and whose opinion is then totally objective. So maybe it's not totally objective if they know you and they're a friend or a colleague, but you get my drift. If they don't have a stake in whatever decision you're making, they can offer you some salient advice. Not my strongest suit, but I read something today that really, I thought, encapsulated who I am and as a decision maker, as a leader. And I think, let me see if I can pull it up. I think it has a lot to do with the quality of the decisions you make. So I'll just read it. A pattern I've noticed in people who make things happen is speed. They don't overthink. They don't overplan or wait for the perfect moment. They move. They go from idea to action in the time it takes most to write the first draft of their plan. While others are debating, researching, or hesitating, they're already learning, adjusting, and making progress. Success doesn't go to the person who had the best idea. It goes to the one who actually did something about it. That's from Tucker Solomon, and I love his stuff. But there's some truth to that. And while I'm, beating myself up about not always being good about listening to dissenting opinions, I will say, if someone's opinion is going to prevent me from acting, I am usually less apt to take it really seriously because I'm a person of action. And I think leaders have to decide, if you're going to build consensus on every decision you make so that you don't take some arrows now and then from people who dissent with you, that's going to make you one kind of leader. Or if you're going to make the best possible decision with input from as many parties as you can, but with that speed, then you're going to get stuff done. And I think you'll be judged on your achievements rather than on who or you did or didn't have in the room when you made the decision. Easter Seals empowers people with disabilities and their families to be full and equal participants in their communities and within society. Easter Seals is where everyone can feel welcomed and people know that they aren't judged, but treated with the dignity that they deserve. Each day, we provide life-changing services nationwide and advocate for policies that improve quality of life. From employment to housing services to job training, childcare and respite care, adult day programs, and so much more. Easter Seals is making a profound impact in thousands of communities every day. You can learn more by visiting easterseals.com. That concludes our episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you like what you heard, be sure to write a review, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to join us in the next episode as we discuss how we can all get on board with transparent leadership.